Which are the main things someone should look into before starting a vertical farm, from an amateur point of view?
Okay, I think what's always important before you start to think about everything as much as possible. Everything is impossible, but what I mean is that you think about for what market would you like to produce? So what crop, what market, and then think, okay, and how. So then you know the crop to grow and in what way to grow. And both aspects so the growth needs to be optimized, but also it needs to be clear that you have a market for it. At this moment, the production in a vertical farm is relatively expensive. So if you just grow a crop and it goes in a shop just as a regular product, as a bulk product, it will be relatively cheap, or you will get a low price, let's say it like that. Then it will not be cost effectively. So you need to think about what do I produce and do I get an added value in the market. I think that's the most important. But then also if you start about growing, what I often see is that people think, oh, I have a room, I just put in some plants and then it will all go. Put in some lamps, but then you will find out that the temperature changes, that the humidity changes. So you need also a control of the temperature and in particular of the humidity. If you have a very rapidly growing crop, it will transpire a lot. Air humidity will increase. It may get too humid. So you need some control on that. At the same time, if your plant is doing very well, the CO2 concentration will drop because they take up the CO2. That's the only way for them also to grow. They need the CO2. So then you need to think, if there is no ventilation with the outside, CO2 concentration will drop, plant will not grow anymore, or not much. Ideally, I would say you will need supplementary CO2 if you want to have a high growth rate. If you have just a small farm, at least give it a thought that you need to refresh the air. And these are, let's say, some common mistakes that you see at many places, which can be, which is a pity if that's not taken care of.
It also seems that commercial vertical farms are struggling against open field and greenhouse production at the moment, rather than competing with each other. I mean, what's your take on that?
I would say, and there's open field production, there's greenhouse production, and that's coming up, the vertical farm. I think all those three will exist next to each other. It will not be that in the future that there will only be vertical farming or only greenhouses. I think you will have all those different production systems, each with their advantages. But indeed, in the market, you have to compete with it. At this moment, you cannot compete on the price. The competition should come from other aspects, from higher added value, that you have a better quality. Or in a number of areas in the world, land use is the availability of land is limited. There's coming up more and more debate about flying by transport by air, in the air by airplanes. So local production is gaining interest. Many places in the world it's hard to grow crops in the field nor in the greenhouse. In the vertical farm you're independent of that, or if you want to do it nearby the big cities, and I don't think it needs to be exactly in the city, but maybe at the outskirts of the city, but still land is then expensive, well then a vertical farm where you don't need much land can be an option.
Given the conditions in Netherlands, do you think that vertical farming is gonna be a big thing here?
I think it will also be start here in the Netherlands. Yes. Although there are many places in the world where the advantages of vertical farms are larger than in the Netherlands. In general, there are a few things. It's about the climate. Cold and dark winter. Well, those places are relatively good for vertical farms, but also hot, dry summers. Also, because hot, dry summer is difficult to grow a crop. Cold, dark winter. I don't say the Netherlands has a very good climate, but it has a relatively mild climate. We do not have very hot summers, and well, the winters are too cold and too dark, but there are many countries which are more up north, which are colder and darker, and also because we have a sea climate. So also if you would go at this latitude around the world, most countries have a land climate so at the same latitude, winters are colder, summers are hotter than the Netherlands. So that makes that, from a climate point of view, the advantage in many countries are bigger than in the Netherlands. We have a flat country, usually with good soil. Vertical farm can be on any soil. Indeed, it can be mountainous or rocky, or because for whatever reason the soil is not good to grow plants in, it doesn't matter. A vertical farm can be there. So I would just say, well, there are other places where the advantages are larger, but I still see that also in the Netherlands, the vertical farming, there will be a place for it. And I think the vertical farming can learn a lot from the greenhouses and the other way around. And I wouldn't be surprised that that in the end there are many systems a bit in between, and that it is not such a sharp distinction anymore between a greenhouse and a vertical farm. We see now, and that was what I forgot to mention initially, we have a company who started, I think, already 7 years, 2012, yes, 7 years ago, at least, it might also be 8 years, propagating the lettuce indoor. Usually in the Netherlands, for most vegetables, there are specialized companies to do the propagation, and then it goes to the grower. This company was not so happy with the plants it got from the plant raiser, so they started to grow their own in an indoor farm. And they decided to do so because, in particular in this propagation phase, many things can go wrong, and they got so much improvement. So they raise now their plants in a vertical farm or in an indoor farm, and then when they have reached a specific size, they move them towards the greenhouse. So the last few weeks before harvest, they in the greenhouse. So they see also well how that part of the growth cycle in an indoor farm, part in the greenhouse. So you see it's getting connected.
Let's talk about the future of all this. There appear to be more challenges than we initially expected. A couple of years ago, vertical farming introduced itself as a solution for all our problems, but that wasn't true. Today, which are the main challenges vertical farming is facing?
Okay, in my opinion, the main challenges is that the energy use is high. We need lamps for the plants. That needs electricity. Sometimes there's so many lamps that you get too much heat, so you need also a cooling system. You need to control the air humidity. So that is what needs to be reduced, and I think that's an urgent part. And I think there's many opportunities to improve it a lot. Of course, it starts with more efficient lamps and converting the electricity into light. But for us as plant scientists, the next step is where we can work on, and that is making more efficient use of the light energy. So it is the light, and all the light should be absorbed by the leaves. Now, sometimes it falls on the floor or on the wall. That's a pity, that's a loss already. And then once it is absorbed, is it the best color for that moment for the plant? Is it at the optimal intensity in interaction with all the conditions? So there's a lot to gain in how plants make use of the light. Also the whole technology of climate control, there's a lot to optimize. So those aspects can help to reduce the use of energy. At the same time, that reduces the cost, because electricity costs are a large fraction of all the costs. Because the two bottlenecks, energy use and the cost price. If you reduce energy, it works on both. I think at least for the coming years, the production, the cost price will be higher than in conventional production, then they say, well, if the costs are higher, then you should have a better product, or a product with a higher value. And that higher value can be because it is a better quality, or it can be consistency. And we should not underestimate that. That if you can say to a supermarket or to who you sell, okay, I can promise you on that day of the year, I can supply you so many kilograms, but of a defined quality. Even if then on average the quality is not better, but it is consistent, the value of that is much higher. Then you could get a higher price, and then it is not such a problem if the cost price is higher. So I think for the coming years the cost price is still higher, whether in the long run things might change, and it very much depends on where you are, in which country. I compare it now, when I talk now, I say this for the Dutch situation, where we have the greenhouse production, which is which is very much optimized already for so many years, so it's very efficient and very cheap. I do know that in many, I'm not sure how it is in Greece, but in many countries the cost price of producing vegetables is much higher. While I would say, well, the cost price of producing in a vertical farm in the Netherlands or in whatever country, well, will be slightly different, but not much different. So whether the production is, whether vertical farming is cheaper or more expensive might depend on the country where we are comparing it to.
Do you think that the vertical farms of the future are going to be huge scale, small scale, something in between?
I think there's room for both. I think most of it will be large scale, automated. I think those I expect to be the economic feasible. But we have to think in different business models than the present production. And there you will see also many smaller scale farms coming up. But anyway, think in different business. I'm not a businessman, but think in different business concepts. Don't think in a traditional way. If you think in a traditional way, you can't imagine why this works. Well, it works. We see now in Germany where wind farm and some more companies are focusing on that, having those small cabinets that they put in the supermarkets or where they place it in restaurants. Consumers like that, and then you get a product with a higher value. So that's, at least at this moment, it's not that warehouse type, but it is, I think it's an important thing. I think also that quite some people would like to grow them at their home. So you see now also those small home appliances. I don't think that it will be in kilograms of vegetables, it will not be a lot, but still I think that quite some consumers want to do so, and then they get connected more to, okay, you can see how plants are growing and you know where their own food is coming from. But the majority I expect will be the bigger warehouse types, automated, because then you can specialize, you can do it relatively cheap. This automation is needed because otherwise you have a lot of labor which is expensive. So personally I believe it will be larger warehouse, the majority, but it will definitely not be the only type of enterprises.
And lastly, what would you suggest to someone who is neither in the vertical farming community commercially or scientifically and wanted to start being involved in all these things?
Okay. It's anyway always good to start on a small scale. Try out, get experience, see what is happening. But at the same time, think about what crops that you think that you would like to grow and for what market. But yeah, and start already. Start if you have no experience. Start growing, because you will find many problems. Everybody would, but those problems can be solved. There are always solutions. So start a little bit. Look around, ask for advice. Yeah, but at a certain moment, start.